Yeah,
Beautiful.
great. So,
Matteo, what are you working on today?
well, what I'm working on, actually, I'm a little bit nervous right now because it's my first time talking with you. So I still have to, you know, uh, uh, recognize all of that. And I apologize in advance if my English is a little bit bad, but I will try my best to, uh, communicate as good as possible.
I appreciate you speaking English for me.
Don't worry, man. And first of all,
That's generous of you.
oh yeah, the worry. I try my best, you know. And first of all, I wanted just to say that you are one of my biggest influences. I hear your music all the time. I discovered you when I was around maybe 15 years old, and I was really into, the shred world. When I discovered Eddie Van Allen for the first time, and that was an incredibly fun journey. I remember first watching you on YouTube, like most of my generation discovered everything on the internet. It's strange talking to you after so much time of listening to you and studying a lot of things. And the funny thing actually is that my first video on YouTube was actually a cover of technical difficulties that I
Yeah.
did maybe in 2016. And I played that all with the fingers. And it was really challenging to me at the time because, it was maybe one of the first tunes I learned from you. Yeah, so there are so many questions, and it's strange to finally meet together. And yeah, I'm sure we will have a great chat.
Well, that's even more generous of you. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
And you sound fantastic as well. But I want to know what you're working on. What music is in your head today?
Well, right now I'm working a lot on the classical guitar things. I really like to compose things with classical guitar. So I came from a classical background. Basically, I studied classical guitar when I was around 14. When I was in high school, only classical guitar was available at the time. So I didn't have to choose. I started with electric when I was around 10 years old, and my first influences were people like AC/DC, Led Zeppelin. So I
Yeah.
actually started with the, distorted guitar and electric guitar. And but when I did go to the high school, only classical guitar was available to me. So I was kind of forced to study classical guitar. And at the beginning, I wasn't really, passionate about it. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot of things through classical guitar. And I like to study things or compose things on the classical guitar, where you have everything available. So like you have the bass line, you have the chords, and you have the melody all at the same time. And with
Yeah.
the classical guitar, it's a little bit easier rather than with the electric, because I associate with the electric with like being in a band and being in a trio maybe. But classical guitar, I like visualize it more like a solo instrument. That's why I prefer like writing with the classical guitar and maybe doing an arrangement with the electric. But I always start with this in my hand,
Oh,
basically.
that's cool.
So, so yeah, I'm currently working on like uh, working on some things only with the classical guitar and then transfer it to the electric maybe. But yeah, most of the time it's with the classical guitar. Also because with my technique, I also use nails.
Yeah.
Uh, so whenever I have, when I study with the electric guitar, my nails tear up really fast with time, because with metal strings, the attack is a little bit more violent with nails, let's say. But with a classical guitar, I actually don't consume a lot my nails, so I can play with a longer period in a longer period of time, and they will not tear up. So it's something I prefer. That's why I really like to study a lot classical guitar. Yeah.
What other classical pieces of music do you love to listen to, or what other, like, do you ever listen to harpsichord music or cello, or like who are you a fan of in the world of classical, 300 years
Well,
ago, whatever the composers were?
well, at the beginning, I was studying a lot of Bach at the beginning, and I remember one of the first tunes I learned was the partita in A minor, and I remember it was. Something similar. And I still remember some of the passages, but I don't, it's really hard to remember those pieces in their entirety
Yeah.
sometimes, because there are a lot of, strange passages for electric guitar, so it's really hard to memorize the shapes and all of that. So you need to play them a lot. And I saw also that you did a back piece in D minor. I remember maybe. Yeah, and they're really fun to play because you know it's really challenging to study it. So Bach was my first kind of introduction to classical music, and then I moved to maybe South American music, like
Hmm.
people like, for example, Antonio Lauro. And Antonio Lauro wrote a lot of vals for the classical guitar. And I think this one is called the Vals Venezolano, and it's something similar. And so that was like one of the first pieces I learned with the classical guitar. And of course, Bourré also.
Yeah.
The classical pieces were like kind of my first introduction. And then I discovered also some of the, South American world. And I discovered like how to comp with the bossa nova style. And so I was trying to do a lot of things where again, you have like melody, harmony, and rhythm at the same time. Nowadays, I try to listen some music where the guitar is not the main protagonist all the time. We guitar players have this tendency to uh, listen too many other guitar players. So sometimes I listen music where really the guitar is not the main protagonist, and this maybe helps you to, isolate yourself from the instrument and thinking only about the music.
When you're writing, at what point do you work on the melody? Like, is that the first thing that you write, or does it come at the end, or the middle, or is it just anywhere?
Well, most of the time I write the melody first, and then I write the chords behind it.
Yeah. So
And
where do you get your melodies?
well, most of the time it's actually by singing them while I'm playing something, and I'm just search like note for note what I'm singing in my head. And this approach to me is a little bit more, instinctive, rather than, playing something that you already know.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly fighting with my muscular memory when I'm learning melodies, because sometimes I want to get into something, and then I just do something that I learned before. And because we have so many licks that we learn, so many scales and stuff, I don't want that to get into the melodies. I just want to follow my head first.
If you think about the music that you've listened to in your life and that you've just memorized in your head, what era do you know the most melodies from? Like for me, I most of the melodies I know are from the 60s or the 70s, and I know so many melodies from that time. but like the last 20 years, I probably know 3 melodies. Like I don't really know anything. But how about you?
Well, I don't know what period of time, but I think most of the melodies I learned were from jazz standards because
Oh,
after the high school, I began to study jazz guitar at the conservatory. And that period of time was the period where I learned most of the songs I know now. So, like, for example, I can give you, like, for example, um, also Stella by Starlight. So
well, you
that was
said that
one of
you
yeah.
said that those you learned, like on your instrument. But what about just ones that you've heard growing up? That you may never have played them, but you just know them because they were on the radio or your parents' record collection, or like where
Well,
do you think most of the melodies that sit in your memory live? Were from?
yeah. Well, one of the first I heard that stuck with me uh, was that song by the Bee Gees, and
Yeah,
yeah, and that was one of the first melodies I remember that that I never learned actually that song on guitar, but
yeah,
I can remember the melody very clearly. So that means that it's a good song.
yeah.
Uh, Also, some things from the Beatles, yeah, Michelle or Norwegian Wood. And, there are a lot of examples of songs that I never quite actually learned on guitar, but I know well the melodies.
So since you're a lot younger than I am, you might know melodies that are more recent that you could recommend to me that I should check out. So like
Well,
in the
that's
last
strange
20
because
years, who's writing the good melodies besides
well,
you?
nowadays I don't know why, but it sounds like it's harder to memorize the melodies because they like look alike to one another. They sound like everything sounds the same sometimes
Yeah,
in this period. But I consider myself really lucky because I came from a musical family and my father also plays guitar. And
yeah,
he was listening to the stuff from the 60s, 70s, a lot of Led Zeppelin, Beatles, AC/DC, this kind of stuff. So that's why I learned those melodies when I was younger, because my father and also my brother plays guitar. So I kind of, when I was younger, I was listening to these songs all the time, but simply it was kind of a passive listening because there was also always music at home. Uh, so maybe it's in my case, I was really lucky because of
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's it's tricky, being in the world of guitar though, at least for rock guitar, because if a lot of rock music, there's a lead singer, and
Yeah.
so if you're the guitar player, the lead singer's doing the melodies, so you're playing the chords to back the singer up, and then when the solo comes up, you've got a short solo, like 8 bars. And so it's like, I don't want to waste my 8 bars with a melody. I want to show my most exciting, fiery stuff then. And so, like,
Yeah.
for me, most of my heroes never played melodies.
Yeah.
The singers did, but the guitar players either, played chunky chords or just went crazy on the solo. So I never learned melodies until like way later in life, when I started to become frustrated as a singer, and I was like, well, maybe I can be a singer on my guitar. So it took me a long time to figure out that was a possibility.
Well, yeah. That was a little bit different for me because I think my generation, we grew up with the idea of the guitar player that has to play instrumental music, you know.
Yeah.
And on the opposite side, there's an era of guitar players that have both sides. In your case, it's like Racer X and Mr. Big. Meanwhile, you have like your own Paul Gilbert projects. But in my case, and I think in most cases, most of us have only like our instrumental projects, and it's harder. I don't know why, but my generation, we didn't really have the chance to, you know, play together and make a band. I mean, there was the chance to do that, but it was more rare in my generation. And I do this example all the time. I I'm the only guitar player in my town, in my
Yeah.
age, and I live in a really small town. So I didn't have the chance to, you know, get some musicians and doing a band, you know. And I did that with my trio, but it was later on when I was around like 20, 21, you know. But maybe your generation, when you were younger, around 15, 16 years old, there were already people that can play around you, and maybe you start a band, and it's a different thing. And I think it's hard to learn melodies also in guitar, because guitar is also a really hard instrument to visualize. And you know, sometimes because we don't use symmetrical tuning, we have this major third here that
Yeah.
still everything's up basically. We don't have like all perfect chords like the bass, for example.
Yeah.
So
I'm so happy about the guitar's tuning. I find all these little things where that makes things easier.
yeah, there are some things that makes things easier, of course, but there are also some things that are harder on guitar. Like for example, if you want to learn a melody up here and you want to learn it on the lowest strings, the
Yeah,
shape,
it's all different.
you know,
The
and
brain has to work harder.
yeah, the brain has to work harder because we have so many different shapes to memorize. So
Yeah.
that's why usually a guitar doesn't sing a lot, maybe, and the singers and maybe the wind instruments are easier to visualize, and they do more melodies because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that we have to work a lot on it. And I wanted to ask you something. What are you working on lately? Are there anything new you wanted to learn on guitar? Like, are there things that like you want to discover? Because at your point in life, I believe you discovered everything about guitar. But is there anything like new that excites you or you are working on right now?
Well, right now, I'm working on a lot of vocal melodies because I grew up listening to so many singers. You know, when I first started, I didn't really know if I wanted to be a guitar player or a piano player or a drummer, um, but I really wanted to be a singer. And I've
No.
been, you know, my voice is very limited, so to learn, like I've been working on these Katie Lang songs. Like she has a song called "Trail of Broken Hearts," which is like and it's just such a beautiful. And she does a yodel. She goes "Trail of Broken," that little, and
Oh
like
yeah.
the tapping thing was great for it. Or even like David Lee Roth from Van Halen.
Oh yeah.
I was working on his part for Beautiful Girls. In the last verse, he's going like, was it? And he goes, what?
Yeah.
And you can get it with a tap.
Yeah.
And so, and just the rhythmic phrasing is so cool because he'll like and then Michael Anthony. And that to me is, all those little things, like that would be almost impossible to notate in a way that would include the important elements of the feel. I mean, you could write it all down, but it would, nobody would ever want to read it. So much of that is about having listened to a particular style and having loved that style so much that you're willing to memorize and get the feel of like from the ends of the earth, where it's like this slow behind the beat bend, and then it gradually speeds up. And I'm really aware of those elements because I teach them. But as you're doing them, you're not thinking. You're just getting them into your hands. So that's one thing. And then harmonically, there's this song. It's like one of the best solos I've ever heard in my life, but it's actually the solo on a clarinet. It's a jazz musician named Paquito de Rivera, and it's this one song where he sits in with another clarinet player named Anat Cohen, and they do like a trading solos. The song is called "And the World Weeps," and there's like 3 chords in the song, but they're really interesting. Like it starts off with like a D minor, and it does almost, the Pink Panther. Was it? It has that kind of harmony to it, where it's D minor. There's a lot of chromatic, and then it hits B flat, like a dominant that sharp 4, whatever that is, and then just an A7. But the scale that he uses is D melodic minor, but he also throws in the blues note. So you'll go, and it's like real snaky and cool. Wow. And then for the next chord where he hits that B flat 7 sharp 11, there's a trick where all you have to do is take your melodic minor and move it up 3 frets.
Oh yeah.
And then over the A7, I can do my Ingve, and I can play. If I play fast, I'm all right. But if I have to phrase and play slowly, and I tried it yesterday at the gig, and I actually gave up. I got about a minute into the song. I was like, I'm not ready for this. Let's do the next tune. And because to play slowly, it's so much more dangerous. Because you end up sitting on a note, and the note actually starts to matter.
The less notes you play, the more importance they have. So that's why it's harder sometimes to phrase things with just a few notes.
And so I'm finally getting to the point where if I play like blues or something that's like a typical pop melody, I know the fretboard well enough where I'm probably going to get it right. But for that melodic minor thing, that's really a new world for me. So even if I hear it, I may not be able to find it right away, and that's a disaster. So I'm working on that a bit. And watch go pull it up on YouTube. It's Anat Cohen, And the World Weeps, and Paquito de Rivera is the first soloist. And his solo is like one of the best musical things I've ever heard in my life. He's just so on fire.
There's actually a similar tune to this chord progression, and I don't know if you know it. It's called Bernie's tune. And he has basically the same kind of harmony in it. And I remember the first time when I discovered this chord here. So B flat 7, sharp 11, or sharp 4. And I remember the first time I understand, oh, you can play F melodic minor on it. And you don't have to know about because I wasn't really a big fan of the modes. Back when I discovered them, it was so confusing for me because I was constantly asking myself why I have to learn 7 different scales if it's just the same scale starting from different points.
Right.
But I began to like notate myself, okay, if I have this B flat 7, sharp 11, I have to play the melodic minor scale 1/5 above. So if I have like B flat here, that means that I have to play F melodic minor. And of course, when I discovered that, it was so much easier for me. And then, I had to learn the modes when it was in the conservatory because you need to learn all the names and all the stuff. But when it comes to visualizing, for me, it is, I want, especially when I'm improvising, I don't want to think all that scales, all that stuff. I just want to, express myself in the most instinctive way. And sometimes it's better for me, okay, it's just F melodic minor. It's better for me to know like one melodic minor through the whole fretboard rather than learning 7 different scales just in one place. It makes more sense to me.
For any song or for any style, the ultimate goal is, like you said, you want to connect to what you hear in your head and just be in the moment. And to me, the modes are almost like a little cheat sheet.
Yeah.
But it really works good if you're playing fast, because then you're never really emphasizing anything very much. Because as soon as you hit a note, you're on to the next. So to me, like the slower and more melodic it becomes, the more you can't really rely on just the finger shape, but you have to really know the sound, and you have to kind of ear train and almost be able to play like air guitar and hum it. And and I'm not there yet with Well, for blues, I can do that with blues. I can play really accurate air guitar with blues, and I know exactly what that note in the air is going to sound like. And if I could play guitar and not even have it plugged in and have earplugs in, and I still know what I'm playing. But if I look at a melodic minor scale, that's not. I don't have as much experience with that.
It takes a lot of time. And one player that I think he helped me to understand more like how to mix melody with licks, because I always say that when I'm playing fast, I'm not really improvising. I'm just combining the things I already know, because nobody thinks that fast. Like these are all like pre-learned licks combined together in order to build a phrase, But when it comes to single note soloing, actually one of my favorite players is Pat Metheny, because he can play really simple, No, really simple melody, but if he needs to do like 16 notes, he's an amazing player too, So I always was fascinated by people that can mix really simple melodies with fast lightning stuff, but not necessarily fast, because, one of the first things, and it was the same when I first discovered you, I was really passionate about your soloing, not necessarily because it was fast, but because it was clean and it was really on time. And these two things for me are way more important than just speed, And I was hearing a lot of, and I'm the things that make special the player, and whatever player is guitar, piano, keyboards, is the way it sits on time, I think it's way more important than just speed. And doesn't matter how fast you do the Yngwie Malmsteen stuff, if it's not really on time, it will not sound really good, And I remember when I first, I think it was Viking Kong, maybe.
Oh yeah.
It was one of the first songs I listened, and it wasn't necessarily because of the speed, but the clarity and the aggressiveness of the phrase was really what makes that song special for me. I think it was one of the first songs I learned, and then I discovered, oh, it's dedicated to Ingrid, and everything was connected,
It's interesting. I don't know how much you do teaching, but to try to teach fast playing, obviously I can try to show a student like exactly what I'm doing. Okay, this is what I do, and here's how to learn it. But I've kind of lost faith in that method, and I kind of feel that playing fast has a lot to do with the individual's body and
Yeah,
and the individual's kind of where they came from, like their history as a player. And so like not everybody who plays fast plays the same way, you know.
yeah,
And there are a lot of, and they're still good, like to me listening to Ingve play fast, I love it. And listening to you play fast is beautiful, and listening to Neil Schon or Gary Moore or Eddie Van Halen or El Di Meola, they're all have their fast moments, but they're
yeah,
all kind of found their own path and have their own techniques to do it. And I think it's fine to try out somebody else's technique just to see how it works.
yeah.
But I'll give up so fast if I feel like it's not going to work for me. I'll be like, no, 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 it didn't sound good. And I won't say never again. I'll just put it on the shelf and maybe
Yeah,
come back to it someday. But a lot of times, looking at other instruments, because that's kind of an interesting thing to do, because then the technique is sort of a total mystery. If you try to figure out something from a harpsichord piece, you're not going to get a lesson about how to pick it because it wasn't picked. It was played on a different instrument.
you have
And
to
so it's
find your own
like,
way to do it. Yeah,
yeah, it's like, can I take those notes? I mean, there was a Bach violin piece I was working on, and it had this really long minor triad, something like and the obvious thing to do was to sweep it, but
yeah.
the sweep technique sounded more like a glissando. So it was like,
Mhm.
brr, 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 and that's not how the phrasing was. It needed to be like a really accurate 16th note, something like that. Maybe there was a pattern inside it. And I would, whatever I would sweep pick it, just like, it's not the right rhythm. And so
Yeah,
I had to invent something new. And the thing I invented was so useful for other things. Like it's my playing like exploded from copying a violin piece. And I guess violin's a little more similar to the guitar because it's a fretted instrument, but the tuning's different. And got a bow instead of a pick, and this neck's this long instead of this long. And so it's pretty different. So
Oh, well, that's maybe when the idea of the spring skipping was born. Maybe like instead of playing, you play like two notes
yeah,
in the
exactly.
string and other two I think it's the same kind of arpeggios you use on Scarified, for example. That kind of idea, let's say,
Yeah.
on or the opening league on Fuzz Universe, for example, as like
Oh yeah.
kind of same kind of idea. And I remember, like for me, when I was studying these pieces, I remember the same way because sweeping is a little bit more uh, hard to control rhythmically because it's just one movement down and one movement up.
Yeah.
Maybe like alternate picking gives you this kind of more precise timing, let's say. So yeah, well, yeah,
And
classical
it,
music is always useful. Yeah,
yeah. And it's always interesting to hear people who have really have find their comfort. Like there's people who have like sweeping just really works for them, and
yeah,
so they'll just take that thing and just make something really big out of it. And for me, like I've tried it a couple times. Like, well, I got like two licks that work, but I'm kind of going to leave it there because if I try to go further, I can tell I'm not getting good results, you know.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is like each individual player will find like, oh, but for me this is working great. So, you know, especially with, I think, with fast playing, that where the technique really gets very sophisticated, uh, you almost can't copy another person. I mean, you know, you can try things, maybe maybe one part of it'll work, but and the
It
other
will never
funny thing,
sound the same. Yeah.
yeah, the other funny thing is, even if you succeed and you're able to copy someone exactly, that's almost a little creepy.
Well, if it is too much similar to
Yeah, then
similar.
it's like, ooh, you
Oh
gotta get
yeah,
your own face. You look too much like my twin, you know.
yeah, yeah. It would be too strange. Yeah, and it's useful to, That's why I said before. It's always useful to listen to other players other than guitar players. And one of my favorite was Michael Brecker for sure.
Oh
He's a
yeah,
sax player, and it's incredibly amazing because even for sax players, he was doing unorthodox things. And
yeah,
I remember one of the first time I listened to him, there was this kind of arpeggios, and it's kind of a big jump for us guitar players. And because I was already playing with fingers, of course, and for me, what I was trying to do, instead of following, the 80s era players, I was playing a lot of, three note per strings kind of stuff.
yeah.
You know, but the thing was, what is the point of playing with fingers if you are doing the same things that pick users are playing?
Yeah.
So that's why I started to listen to other players, and Michael Brecker was one of them. And I remember when I first discovered this kind of arpeggios, and it's really strange, because it's almost like you are playing the shape of the chord, and this was for me actually easier than playing three note per strings because the finger is already there.
Yeah.
So I was playing like one note per string stuff without actually using the sweeping because I can decide which note I'm playing. I can always start with the first string, for example, and
Yeah.
it is a relaxed movement. It's not like, you
Yeah.
know. And so I decided to, going into that direction. That's why I try to not play anymore, let's say 80s stuff, shred stuff, because it's always associated with big players. And that's why I wanted to, go forward and try to find something that was associated with fingers. And Michael Brecker was really useful to develop this kind of stuff. I remember this first arpeggio, so it was like mind-opening for me. Maybe same thing for you, for the back piece, for the G minor arpeggio with string skipping.
And
So,
recently, I've been really into Oscar Peterson, the piano player,
well, yeah,
and I learned this line from him. He's playing a blues in C, and of course, if it's a blues, anything that I take from it, I can use because I love playing the blues. So he played like, and you know, it's just the coolest line, and I got to use like, it's like this part. That's my scarified lick, you know.
yeah,
And Oscar Peterson uses it. And that last part, that can be like a cool lick on its own. Then the four chords, the five
oh,
chord,
wow.
and that move, you know, quickly from like the fifth to the root. You know, if I played that on two strings, it's hard to do that fast. Maybe you could do it with, you know, with your technique, but for me, I
Yeah,
can't pick it back and forth that quick. That's really hard to do with the pick.
wow.
So if I hammer on and pull off, then I can get like that nice swing. Go one, two, one, two, three, four, one. and it's swinging.
Wow, great. I don't know why, but I can't hear the guitar properly because
Oh yeah, it's there's this sound processing that they do to make the speech come through clear, and it messes up the
um,
music. If
yeah,
you had heard it, it would have been good.
yeah, yeah. But I remember one thing that I learned from Oscar, and I remember there was this lick, and it was, and I was basically it's all the triads from the C major, and it's strange because we actually never do that as guitar players, you know. And that was useful also for me. Oscar is a master of bebop, jazz, you know, blues especially. You know, all this chromatic stuff. And I learned a lot of this stuff also from George Benson. You know, all this kind of stuff. I don't know if you can hear my guitar properly, but
Yeah, half the time it comes through, probably the same situation.
yeah, okay.
This is proof that computers aren't going to take over the world quite yet. They still can't get speech and music at the same time. You stupid computers.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen in a short time, that's for sure.
So what's your next project?
Well, my next project is it will be my second album. I did my first album last year,
Yeah.
and the second album I hope that will be ready by the end of this year. If not, it will be next year for sure. And as I said before, I'm trying to compose things starting with the classical guitar and then maybe arranging with electric or just stay with classical, you know, because I really like to compose just with the classical guitar alone. And what about you, your next project?
Well, I've got about another month and a half on the road with Mr. Big. We're doing our big finish tour. So back on the road for a while. And after that, I'll be catching up at my online school because I've got a lot of, I'm always teaching there. I've done probably this year I'll hit 15,000. I'm almost at 15,000 lessons that are archived on the site, which is insane, and but good.
Wow.
And then I should probably get back to writing and figure out what I'm going to write next. And that until I really get into it, I never know what it is. I just sort of try everything, and then whatever seems to be coming out the best, I start to follow that. But it's sometimes hard to plan writing, because inspiration happens when it happens. It seems to be not always connected to a plan.
Do you have some kind of writing routine or something that you stick to when you are writing some new songs?
It's nice to have lyrics, even if I'm not going to sing them and I'm just going to play it on guitar. It just gives me a structure to play with. Oh, and so sometimes I might never even tell anybody what the lyrics are, or sometimes I might actually like the lyrics and tell people what they are. But it's just that gives me a place to start. I almost think of it like a scaffolding. If you're working on building a building, you have to build the scaffolding to work on it, and then later you take that away. But it was important to have that as part of the building process.
Oh, and about buildings, I remember there's a tune of you. I think it's really called "I Own a Building," where it's instrumental music, but sometimes in the melody I can really hear "I own a building" while playing the melody, and that was strange to me because it's almost like there are lyrics, even if instrumental stuff, So it's really interesting to.
And again, I really always had a strong desire to be a singer, and it's nice to have an outlet for that in a way where I don't have the limitations of my voice. With my voice, my range is pretty small, so it really I can't sing a grand melody that has a lot of, you know, a lot of lows and highs in the same thing. On a guitar, you know, if I want to do a Mariah Carey song, you know, that high note is there. You know, if I want
Yeah.
to do a
You don't need
lull
to warm
song,
up in order to play it. Yeah.
yeah. There's such a wider range of pitch, and of course, on the guitar, you know, you can't shape a word quite the same way that a singer would, and you know, and singers have such, you know, a great singer has such great texture, and I might not be able to copy that exactly, but I can try and I can get closer. So that's what I'm doing.
Another question I wanted to ask you, and that's because I never actually teach. Before teaching, I kind of want to prepare myself how to give the information I have in the best way possible. But I wanted to ask you, when you first started teaching, are there anything new you learned just by, you know, teaching people?
Yeah. Well, at the school, my online school, the way it works is with the student can send in a video of them playing, and then so I can hear them, and that's incredibly helpful. You know, it's much harder to teach at a clinic where you have an audience of 300 people, and I don't really know what they sound like or what they need. So, you know, when I can hear a person play, you know, that immediately I know, like, okay, well, this is well, and also they'll tell me what they want. They'll say, like, oh, I really am into this. I want to work on this. So try to do two things. One, I try to make them happy and give them what they want.
Yeah.
Two, I try to make me happy because I hear things. They all go like, oh, I wish their vibrato was a little more under control, or
Oh, yeah.
I wish they had a better, you know, sense of phrasing, or I just wish they could count off whatever they played in the same tempo. To just go like 1, 2, 3, 4, da, 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 and have like what they play match their count, which is you
Yeah.
wouldn't believe how rare that is.
Oh.
Yeah, and I said, you know, so I'll tell them, like, you know, I'll show you what you want, but to make me happy, I want to hear you count to 4, and your drummer is going to understand the tempo. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and so, you know, because I want you to be a good friend with your drummer. You know, I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
probably my main goal at my school, is that anybody who's been there a while, if they decide to jam with a drummer, that they're going to put a smile on the drummer's face. The drummer's going to go like, right on. I like playing with this cat. You know, they got their rhythm together. You know, and
Yeah.
rhythm isn't just accompaniment. You know, rhythm is also the structure of a solo. You know, so it's global. You can't leave that behind just because, you know, there's a rhythm guitar player.
Well, true. And I remember one of the first things I noticed, like one of the first differences I noticed between a rock player or just an electric player and a classical player is that classical players tend to play too much time alone. You know, you are just
Yeah.
alone with your score, and you play, and you play technically really good because they take care of all the details and all the stuff.
Yeah.
But when they have to play with a rhythm section, it's kind of strange because they are not used to follow a drummer or maybe follow a player. And that's when the rock background comes in out, because I first started with, you know, playing along Led Zeppelin records and, you know, the Purple also. And Jimi Hendrix was also a big influence, one of the biggest influences at the start. And there was always there was drums, you know, and in order to, you know, learn the riffs, you need to, you know, learn also the rhythm. And that wasn't really the case when I was learning a classical guitar. I think that's one of the things that can help the classical player to achieve like a little bit of rhythm going on that the rock players has from the start, you know.
And if you are playing by yourself, you know, as a classical guitar player or classical piano player, it can be very beautiful to have, you know, changes in tempo.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that can really be an expressive element, but you can only do that yourself. As soon as you start
That's the
playing with more than
thing.
one person, you have to kind of agree, you know, we have to play together, you know, and so it requires,
You
you
use
know,
a lot of rubato things, your rubato element in classical guitar. It's just an element of expression, as you said, but sometimes it's just better to do it at tempo with other people.
yeah.
One last question I wanted to ask. what do you think about the new generation in general? And what do you think can be a good advice to us new players?
I would say make sure you have a good logo.
Oh yeah.
Because the bands that have the most successful careers, Iron Maiden, imagine how many T-shirts they've sold. I mean, the music is great. I love Iron Maiden, listening to the songs. But those T-shirts, I bet they've got their own plane.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was paid for by the T-shirts. So get yourself a good band name, or what if it's your name, get a good logo for it, and get the T-shirts ready.
Yeah, Iron Maiden is also a good clothing brand, basically. They sell more shirts than CDs sometimes.
Yeah. And besides that, just music is such a huge art. And as you go through it in your life, I think you'll find different aspects of it. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a time when playing fast was the most important thing, and I really needed to spend time there. And now I'm into melodies, and other times I was into songwriting, and I don't know if it's possible to study all those things at the same time. I mean, you could try, but allow yourself to follow your passion, and but know that as you go through your musical journey, you'll find more passions. It's never ending, and thank goodness.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matteo. And and I hope someday I can be your support band.
No, don't never say that. No, man. I mean, it was such a pleasure to just chat and doing some examples together. I'm incredibly excited, and as I said before, you've been, especially from the start, and you still are an inspiration. And one thing that I really respect a lot, there are some players that you hear them play, and maybe they play the same stuff they played when they have like 20 years. I don't know why they don't have this kind of evolution. Maybe they don't have enough curiosity. But I think you and few other players are the perfect examples to how to evolve yourself through time, how to learning new things, and how to be, a curious person in general. And I really respect that. I really love your music now as I loved your music back then, back with the first things, technical difficulties and all that stuff. There's a huge evolution, and I would love to aspire to be that when I will be your age, I hope so. Yeah, that will be such a dream for me.
Oh, thank you, Matteo. I'm sure you will.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I hope
Okay,
so.
now get to work on that T-shirt.
Yeah, I have to work on the logo. Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody on the internet.
Bye, guys.